The automatic doors of Tech World Electronics slid open with a soft whoosh as 17-year-old David stepped inside. The cool air conditioning hit his face, a welcome relief from the hot Saturday afternoon sun. He adjusted his school letterman jacket and took a deep breath. Today was the day he'd finally buy his own laptop. David had been working at the local grocery store for 8 months now, stocking shelves and helping customers every weekend. Every paycheck went straight into his savings account. His mom always told him that if he wanted something, he had to work for it. And boy, had he worked for this. The store was packed with weekend shoppers. Families wandered around with their kids, pointing at the latest smartphones and tablets. A group of college students huddled around the gaming section, debating which console to buy. The sound of conversations mixed with the quiet hum of electronics created a busy but comfortable atmosphere. David pulled out his phone and opened the Notes app. He'd spent weeks researching laptops online, reading reviews, comparing prices, and watching YouTube videos about which models were best for college. His list was detailed, with specific requirements he needed for his upcoming freshman year at State University. He walked toward the laptop section, his sneakers squeaking slightly on the polished floor. The display was impressive, with dozens of laptops arranged on sleek white tables. Each one had a small card showing the price and main features. David's eyes immediately went to the mid-range section. He wasn't looking for anything fancy, just something reliable that could handle his coursework. A sales associate walked by, a young guy probably not much older than David himself. He had a friendly smile and wore the store's signature blue polo shirt. "Hey there," the associate said, stopping near David. "Looking for anything specific today?" "Yeah, I'm starting college in the fall," David replied, holding up his phone with his research notes. "I need something good for writing papers and maybe some light design work. Nothing too expensive, though." The associate nodded. "Smart to do your research first. Most people just come in and buy whatever looks cool. What's your budget looking like?" David had saved up $1,200. It had taken him months of working 15 hours a week while keeping up with his honors classes. Around $1,000, maybe a little more if it's really worth it. "Perfect. Let me show you a few options that might work well for you." As they talked, David felt proud of himself. This wasn't just any purchase. This laptop would be his tool for the next 4 years of college. He'd use it to write essays, research projects, maybe even start his own blog like he'd been thinking about. It represented all his hard work and his dreams for the future. The associate showed him 3 different models, explaining the differences between processors and memory. David took notes in a small notebook he always carried, writing down the pros and cons of each option. He'd learned this habit from his dad, who always said to write things down if they were important. "This one here," the associate said, pointing to a silver laptop, "is really popular with college students. Good battery life, decent processing power, and it's built to last. Plus, it's right in your price range." David picked up the laptop carefully. It was lighter than he expected but felt solid. He opened it and tested the keyboard, typing a few sentences to see how it felt. The screen was crisp and bright. Everything about it seemed right. "Can I see the specs one more time?" he asked, pulling out his notebook again. The associate grabbed a detailed spec sheet from behind the display. David compared it to his research notes, checking off requirements one by one. Processor speed, memory, storage capacity, graphics capability, battery life, warranty terms. Everything matched what he'd been looking for. Other customers moved around them, some browsing casually while others seemed to know exactly what they wanted. A mom with 2 young kids was looking at tablets nearby, trying to keep her children from touching everything. An elderly couple asked another sales associate about smartphones, speaking quietly about which features they needed. David appreciated how normal everything felt. Just people shopping for technology, making decisions about purchases that mattered to them. He'd been worried that buying his first major item might feel overwhelming. But the associate was patient and helpful without being pushy. "I think this might be the one," David said, looking at the silver laptop again. "But I want to check out a couple more options just to be sure." "Of course," the associate said. "Take your time. I'll be around if you have any questions." David moved to the next display table where slightly more expensive models were arranged. He knew these were probably out of his budget, but he wanted to see what the differences were. Maybe if one of them was significantly better, he could ask his parents to help with the extra cost. He picked up a sleek black laptop and opened it. The screen was definitely nicer, and the keyboard felt more premium. But when he saw the price tag, his heart sank a little. $1,500. That was $300 more than he had saved. Still, he made notes about its features. Maybe he could work a few more weeks and save up the difference. College didn't start for another 3 months. If he picked up some extra shifts at the grocery store, he might be able to afford it. A family approached the display near him. The dad was explaining to his teenage daughter why she didn't need the most expensive laptop for high school. David smiled to himself, remembering similar conversations with his own parents. They'd always taught him the value of money and the importance of making smart choices. He spent the next 20 minutes carefully examining different models, taking detailed notes about each one. Some were too expensive, others didn't have the features he needed, but he was getting a clearer picture of what he wanted. The silver laptop the associate had first shown him kept seeming like the best choice. It had everything he needed, nothing he didn't, and the price was exactly right. Sometimes the obvious choice really was the best one. David looked around the store one more time, taking in the busy weekend atmosphere. Families shopping together, young professionals comparing phones, teenagers checking out gaming equipment. Everyone had their own needs and budgets, their own stories about why they were there. Soon he'd be one of those college students, carrying his own laptop across campus, using it in dorm rooms and libraries. The thought filled him with excitement and nervousness. This purchase felt like a real step toward his future, toward independence and adulthood. He walked back to the silver laptop, opened his notebook one final time, and reviewed his notes. Everything checked out. This was it. This was going to be his laptop. David was reading the warranty information on the laptop when he noticed someone watching him. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see a middle-aged woman standing a few feet away, her arms crossed, staring in his direction. At first, he didn't think much of it. Maybe she was waiting to look at the same laptop. The woman had perfectly styled blonde hair and wore an expensive-looking purse slung over her shoulder. Her clothes screamed money, from her designer jeans to her spotless white sneakers. Everything about her appearance suggested she was used to getting what she wanted. David continued his examination of the laptop, trying to focus on his decision. He lifted it again to check its weight and opened a few programs to see how quickly they loaded. The machine responded well, and he was becoming more confident this was the right choice. But the woman was still there, and now she seemed to be moving closer. David glanced up briefly and caught her eye. Instead of the polite nod or smile you'd expect from a fellow shopper, her expression was cold and suspicious. She quickly looked away, but he could tell she was still watching him. Feeling uncomfortable, David moved to a different display table to look at accessories. Maybe she wanted to see the laptop he'd been examining. He picked up a laptop case, checking the price and dimensions to make sure it would fit his chosen model. The woman followed him. Now, David was sure something was wrong. He looked around for the sales associate who had helped him earlier, but the guy was busy with another customer across the store. The feeling of being watched made his skin crawl. He'd experienced this before in other stores, and it never felt good. He tried to ignore it and focused on laptop bags. A good case would protect his investment, and some of them looked pretty professional. He imagined himself walking across campus with his new laptop safely tucked inside. "Excuse me," came a sharp voice behind him. David turned around. The woman was standing right there, closer than felt comfortable. Her face wore an expression of barely contained anger. "Are you planning to buy something, or are you just here to look around?" she asked, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer. David was taken aback by the directness of her question. "I'm sorry?" "I've been watching you handle those expensive laptops for 20 minutes, she continued, her voice getting louder. "You keep picking them up, opening them, playing with them. If you can't afford to buy anything, maybe you shouldn't be touching the merchandise." Other customers nearby started to notice the confrontation. A couple looking at tablets glanced over with curiosity. David felt his face getting hot with embarrassment. "I'm actually planning to purchase one," he said as calmly as he could manage. "I've been saving up for months," the woman laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Right. With what money? You look like you can barely afford the clothes you're wearing." David looked down at his outfit. He was wearing his school Letterman jacket, which he was proud of, clean jeans, and his favorite sneakers. Nothing about his appearance seemed inappropriate for shopping in an electronics store. "I work at Peterson's Grocery," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. I've been saving my paychecks for this laptop. I start college in the fall." But the woman wasn't listening. She had turned to address the other customers who were now openly staring at the scene. "This is exactly what's wrong with these stores," she announced loudly. "They let anyone walk in here and handle thousands of dollars worth of merchandise. I bet he doesn't have $50 to his name." David felt the eyes of everyone around him. A small crowd was forming as the woman's voice carried across the store. Some people looked uncomfortable with the situation, while others seemed curious about what was happening. "Ma'am, I really don't understand why you're upset," David said, trying to de-escalate the situation. "I'm just shopping like everyone else." "Shopping?" The woman practically shrieked. "You call this shopping? I call it suspicious behavior. You've been casing these laptops, probably figuring out which one would be easiest to steal." The accusation hit David like a slap. Several people in the crowd gasped audibly. A father quickly moved his young children away from the area. The atmosphere in the store had completely changed from the comfortable shopping environment it had been just minutes before. "That's not true," David said, his voice stronger now despite his shock. "I would never steal anything." "Oh, please," the woman continued, seemingly energized by the growing audience. "Look at you. Look at where you come from. Everyone knows your type loves to steal from stores like this." The racist undertone of her words was unmistakable now. David felt sick to his stomach. He'd encountered prejudice before, but never so publicly, never so aggressively. The crowd around them had grown larger, and he could see some people pulling out their phones. "My type?" David repeated, making sure everyone heard what she was implying. "Don't play innocent with me," the woman snapped. "I know exactly what you're doing here. You came in here looking for something to take. Well, I'm not going to let that happen on my watch." She turned to address the crowd again, speaking even louder now. "This is why we can't have nice things in this neighborhood. These people come in here pretending to shop, but really they're just looking for opportunities to steal." David's hands were shaking now, partly from anger, and partly from the humiliation of being falsely accused in front of so many people. He could see the phones recording, knowing this moment was being captured and would probably end up online. "I have money," he said, pulling out his wallet to show his debit card and the cash he'd brought as backup. "I've been working and saving for months to buy this laptop." But the woman waved dismissively at his wallet. "Anyone can carry around fake cards and a few dollars. That doesn't prove anything." The situation was spiraling completely out of control. David looked around for help, for someone in authority who could put a stop to this nightmare. The sales associate who had helped him earlier was now pushing through the crowd, looking alarmed. "What's going on here?" the associate asked, looking between David and the angry woman. "This young man has been acting suspiciously," the woman declared before David could speak. "He's been handling expensive merchandise for way too long, clearly casing the place. I demand you call security right now." The sales associate looked confused. "Sir, you were the one interested in the laptop for college, right?" "Yes," David said quickly. "We were talking about the silver model. I was just taking my time to make sure it was the right choice." "He's lying," the woman interrupted. "I've been watching him. He has no intention of buying anything. He's here to steal, and I won't stand by and let it happen." David could see the conflict on the young associate's face. The guy obviously remembered their conversation and didn't believe the accusations, but a customer was making a serious claim about potential theft. "Maybe we should just call the manager," the associate suggested hesitantly. "Call security," the woman demanded. "And search his bag, check his pockets. I guarantee you'll find something he's trying to steal." The crowd around them continued to grow. David could hear whispered conversations, some people defending him and others expressing doubt. The phones kept recording, capturing every moment of his humiliation. This was supposed to be one of the best days of his life. He'd finally saved enough money to buy his first laptop, a symbol of his hard work and his bright future. Instead, it had turned into a public nightmare based on nothing but the color of his skin and one woman's prejudiced assumptions. David took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. He knew that how he handled this situation would matter, not just for himself but for everyone watching and recording. The last thing he wanted was to give anyone a reason to say the woman's suspicions were justified. But inside, his heart was breaking. This was America in the 21st century, and he was being treated like a criminal for the simple act of shopping while black. The store manager arrived first, a tired-looking man in his 40s, who clearly hadn't expected to deal with drama on a busy Saturday afternoon. Behind him came two security guards, their radios crackling with static. The crowd of onlookers had grown even larger, with people from other sections of the store coming to see what the commotion was about. "What seems to be the problem here?" the manager asked, looking between David and the woman who had started all this. The woman immediately launched into her accusations again, speaking rapidly and gesturing wildly. "This young man has been acting suspiciously for the past half hour. He keeps handling expensive laptops, opening them, examining them closely. He's clearly planning to steal something, and I demand you do something about it." David watched the manager's face as he listened. The man looked skeptical, glancing between the well-dressed woman making the accusations and David, who was still holding his notebook full of laptop research. "Sir," the manager said, turning to David, "can you tell me what you're doing in the store today?" "I'm here to buy a laptop for college," David replied, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "I've been saving money for my job for months. I was comparing different models to make sure I chose the right one." He held up his notebook, showing pages of detailed notes about processors, memory, battery life, and prices. "I spent weeks researching online before coming here. The sales associate over there was helping me." The young sales associate nodded quickly. "That's right, Mr. Peterson. We had a whole conversation about his needs for college. He knew exactly what he was looking for. He had a budget of around $1,000. But the woman wasn't backing down. If anything, she seemed more agitated by the fact that people weren't immediately taking her side. "Of course he has a story prepared," she said loudly, making sure everyone in the crowd could hear. "Criminals always have excuses ready. Look at him. Does he look like someone who can afford a $1,000 laptop?" "I don't think so." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some people seemed uncomfortable with her blatant prejudice, while others appeared uncertain about what to believe. David could see phones everywhere, recording every word, every expression, every moment of this humiliating ordeal. "Ma'am," the manager said carefully, "we can't make assumptions about customers based on their appearance. This young man hasn't done anything wrong that I can see." "Haven't done anything wrong?" the woman shrieked. "He's been casing your store for 30 minutes. He's probably already slipped something into his pockets or backpack. Search him. Do your job." One of the security guards, a large man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, stepped forward reluctantly. "Sir, I'm sorry about this, but would you mind if we just checked your bag? Just to clear this up quickly." David felt his heart racing. He knew he had nothing to hide, but the principle of being searched based on racist accusations made him feel sick. Still, he also knew that refusing would only make things worse. "Fine," he said, taking off his backpack and opening it. "But this is wrong, and everyone here knows it." The security guard looked through David's backpack quickly and thoroughly. Inside were his car keys, his wallet, a water bottle, his notebook, some pens, and his phone charger. Nothing that didn't belong to him, nothing suspicious. "Bag's clean," the guard announced to the crowd, but the woman wasn't satisfied. "Check his pockets. Check his jacket." He could have hidden something anywhere. Now even the manager looked annoyed. "Ma'am, I think we've gone far enough. This young man clearly hasn't stolen anything." "You're not taking this seriously," the woman shouted, her face red with anger. "This is exactly why crime is so bad in this area. You store employees are too scared to do anything about obvious criminals." David had heard enough. Despite his determination to stay calm, the continued attacks on his character were becoming unbearable. "I'm not a criminal," he said firmly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm an honor student. I work 20 hours a week at Peterson's Grocery while maintaining a 3.8 GPA. I volunteer at the community center reading to kids every Tuesday. I've never stolen anything in my life." He pulled out his wallet and showed his student ID, his work ID badge, and his volunteer card from the community center. "These are who I am, not whatever story she's making up in her head." Some people in the crowd started nodding approvingly. A few even began to speak up. "Leave the kid alone," said an older man with gray hair. "He's obviously just shopping." "This is ridiculous," added a woman holding a toddler. "The boy hasn't done anything wrong." But the accusing woman only got more aggressive as she sensed the crowd turning against her. "Oh, so now you're all going to believe his sob story. Wake up, this is how they operate. They come prepared with fake IDs and touching stories about volunteering." "Fake IDs?" David repeated incredulously. "These are real. You can call my school, Call my job, call the community center. Everyone there knows me. The woman laughed bitterly. Right. Like they're going to tell the truth about one of their own. The racist implications of her words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several people in the crowd gasped or shook their heads in disgust. The phones kept recording, capturing every prejudiced word for the world to see. David felt tears of frustration burning behind his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. He wouldn't give this woman the satisfaction of seeing him break down. Instead, he focused on the faces in the crowd, seeing the mix of support, disgust, and uncomfortable awareness of what was really happening here. This isn't about theft, David said clearly, his voice carrying across the store. This isn't about suspicious behavior. This is about the color of my skin, and everyone here knows it. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the woman seemed momentarily stunned by his direct confrontation of her racism, but then she recovered, doubling down on her accusations. Oh, here we go with the race card. Just because I'm concerned about crime, you want to make this about race. Well, I won't be intimidated into staying quiet when I see suspicious activity. What suspicious activity? David demanded. Shopping? Taking notes? Talking to a sales associate? Which part of normal customer behavior looks suspicious to you? The manager stepped in again, clearly wanting to end this scene. Ma'am, sir, let's all just calm down. This has gone far enough. But calm was the last thing the woman wanted. She had an audience now, and she seemed determined to make her point. Fine, you want to know what's suspicious? I'll tell you exactly what I saw. She pointed dramatically at David. He came in here dressed like he can't afford anything, went straight to the most expensive laptops, and started handling them like he owned the place. He's been taking notes, probably planning which ones to come back for later, and when I questioned him about it, he got defensive and started making excuses. David stared at her in disbelief. Every single thing she described was normal shopping behavior. The fact that she saw it as suspicious said everything about her prejudiced mindset. Everything you just described is what customers do, he said. They look at products, compare features, take notes, and ask questions. That's literally what shopping is. Not when you look like you do, the woman shot back before she could stop herself. The gasps from the crowd were audible now. Several people started talking at once, some calling out the woman's obvious racism. The phones captured it all, recording the moment when her prejudice was laid completely bare. David felt a strange sense of vindication mixed with sadness. He'd been vindicated because her racism was now undeniable, but sad because this was still happening in 2024, in front of families and children who had to witness such hatred. The security guards looked uncomfortable. The manager appeared frustrated, and the sales associate who had helped David looked genuinely upset. But the woman seemed oblivious to how badly she'd exposed herself, still convinced she was in the right. That's enough, the manager said firmly. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store. Ask me to leave? The woman sputtered. I'm the one trying to protect your business. I'm a paying customer. You can't kick me out for trying to prevent theft. You're not preventing theft, the manager replied. You're harassing another customer based on his race, and that's not acceptable in this store. The crowd murmured approval, but David knew this wasn't over. Even if the woman left, the damage was done. His peaceful shopping trip had been turned into a public spectacle, all because someone looked at him and saw a criminal instead of a college-bound honor student. Just as the manager was asking the woman to leave, David pulled out his phone. The crowd watched curiously as he scrolled through his contacts and made a call. Hi, Mom, he said calmly into the phone, his voice carrying clearly in the now quiet store. Yeah, I'm at Tech World Electronics on Maple Street. There's been a situation here. No, I'm fine, but I think you should come down here. Yes, that Tech World. The woman who had been causing all the trouble rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh, great, now he's calling for backup. Probably getting his friends to come intimidate me. But David ignored her completely, continuing his conversation. Yeah, Mom, just come to the laptop section. You'll see the crowd. He paused, listening to his mother's response. No, don't worry. I handled it okay. Just hurry, please. He hung up and slipped his phone back into his pocket. The crowd was buzzing with curiosity about who he'd called and why. Some people seemed impressed by how calm he'd remained throughout the entire ordeal. My mother is coming, David announced to the manager. She'll want to hear about what happened here today. The woman snorted. His mother? What's she going to do, yell at us too? This whole family probably has a victim complex. But something in David's calm confidence made the manager pause. There was something about the way the teenager had handled himself. Something about his composure and the way he'd spoken about his mother coming. That suggested there was more to this story. How long until she gets here? The manager asked David. She works close by, David replied. Maybe 5 minutes. During those 5 minutes, the crowd remained. Many people clearly invested in seeing how this situation would resolve. The woman continued to mutter complaints about how unfairly she was being treated, while David simply stood quietly, occasionally checking his phone. The sales associate who had originally helped David came over to him. "Hey man, I'm really sorry about all this. You were obviously just shopping and that lady was way out of line." "Thanks," David said. "I appreciate you speaking up for me." "Of course. You were one of the most prepared customers I've helped all day. Most people don't do nearly as much research as you did." Meanwhile, the security guards were having a quiet conversation with the manager. David couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could see them glancing between him and the woman, clearly trying to figure out how to handle the situation. The woman, for her part, seemed to be getting more agitated as the minutes passed. "How long are we going to stand around here?" "I have shopping to do. I shouldn't have to wait for his mother to show up just because he's trying to make a scene." "You're the one who made the scene," pointed out the older man who had defended David earlier. "The boy was just shopping." "Mind your own business," the woman snapped. "You don't know what you're talking about." But then the automatic doors at the front of the store slid open, and a well-dressed black woman in a professional pantsuit walked in with purposeful strides. She was clearly looking for someone, scanning the store until she spotted the crowd gathered in the electronics section. As she approached, David waved to her. "Mom, over here." The woman who had caused all the trouble looked at David's mother with obvious surprise. This wasn't what she had expected. David's mother looked professional, confident, and expensive in a way that didn't fit the narrative the woman had created in her mind. But the real shock came when the store manager saw David's mother approaching. "Dr. Williams?" the manager said, his eyes widening in recognition. "What are you doing here?" David's mother smiled grimly. "Hello, Tom, I'm here because my son called me. Apparently there's been some kind of incident involving him and one of your customers." The crowd murmured with interest. It was clear that the manager knew David's mother, and not just as a casual acquaintance. There was a level of professional respect in his voice that suggested she was someone important. "Your son?" the manager repeated, looking between David and his mother with dawning realization. "Yes, my son David," she confirmed, putting a protective arm around the teenager. "Now, would someone like to explain to me why my honor student son was accused of being a thief while shopping for his college laptop?" The woman who had started it all was starting to look uncomfortable for the first time. She'd clearly expected David's mother to be someone she could dismiss easily. But Dr. Williams commanded immediate respect from the store manager. "Dr. Williams," the manager said carefully, "there seems to have been a misunderstanding. This customer," he gestured toward the woman, "believed your son was acting suspiciously, but we've determined that he was simply shopping." "Suspiciously," Dr. Williams repeated, her voice taking on an edge that made everyone pay attention. "What exactly did my son do that seemed suspicious?" The manager looked extremely uncomfortable now, clearly not wanting to repeat the racist accusations in front of David's obviously successful and professional mother. The woman, however, seemed oblivious to how the dynamic had changed. "Your son was handling expensive merchandise he obviously couldn't afford," she said defensively. "I was just trying to protect the store from theft." Dr. Williams turned to look at the woman directly for the first time. "Excuse me? Did you just say my son obviously couldn't afford something? Based on what exactly?" The woman's confidence was starting to waver. "Well, I mean, look at him. He's just a teenager. Most teenagers can't afford $1,000 laptops." "Most teenagers, or black teenagers specifically?" Dr. Williams asked pointedly. The question hung in the air like a challenge. The woman's face flushed red as she realized how her words sounded. "I never said anything about race," she protested weakly. "You didn't have to," Dr. Williams replied. "Your assumptions spoke for themselves." Then she turned back to the manager. "Tom, I think there are some things about my son you should know. David isn't just any teenager. He's been featured in the City Herald twice for his volunteer work with literacy programs. He maintains a 3.8 GPA while working part-time to save for college. And he's been accepted to State University with a partial academic scholarship. The crowd listened intently as Dr. Williams continued. But more importantly, David has been volunteering as a youth speaker for the past 2 years. He visits schools and community centers to talk about overcoming prejudice and building bridges between communities. He's spoken to thousands of young people about the importance of judging others by their character rather than their appearance. The woman who had accused David looked stunned. This clearly wasn't the narrative she had expected. But here's the thing that might interest you most, Tom, Dr. Williams continued, turning back to the manager. David isn't just a customer today. As you know, I'm the Director of Community Relations and Diversity Initiatives for Tech World's corporate office. This is my son. The revelation hit the crowd like a thunderbolt. Phones that had been recording quietly were now held higher, capturing every moment of this dramatic turn. The manager's face went pale as he realized the full implications of what had happened. The woman who had started it all looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Her confident accusations suddenly seemed not just wrong, but potentially career-ending as she realized she'd been attacking the son of a Tech World corporate executive. David watched his mother with pride. She hadn't raised her voice or lost her composure, but she'd completely changed the dynamic of the situation just by being who she was. The same people who had watched him be humiliated were now seeing him in an entirely different light. Now, Dr. Williams said, her voice calm but carrying clear authority, I'd like to know exactly what happened here today, and I'd like to know what steps this store is going to take to ensure it never happens again. The store manager, Tom, looked like he wanted to crawl under one of the display tables. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he realized the full scope of what had just happened in his store. Not only had a customer been racially profiled, but that customer was the son of a corporate executive who could probably have him fired with a single phone call. Dr. Williams, he began, his voice shaking slightly. I'm so sorry about this incident. This is absolutely not how we want any customer to be treated, especially... He trailed off, clearly struggling with how to address the racial aspect without making things worse. Especially your boss's son? Dr. Williams finished for him, her tone sharp but controlled. Especially anyone, Tom corrected quickly. But yes, this is particularly embarrassing given your position with the company. Please know that we will investigate this thoroughly and take appropriate action. The woman who had caused all the trouble was now looking frantically between David, his mother, and the manager. Her face had gone pale as the reality of her situation sank in. She'd not only made racist accusations against an innocent teenager, but she'd done it to the son of someone with real power in the company. I didn't know, she stammered. If I had known who he was... Dr. Williams turned to face the woman directly, her expression stern but not unkind. That's exactly the problem, isn't it? You didn't think my son deserved basic respect as a human being unless he was connected to someone important. Every person who walks into this store deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of who their parents are. The crowd murmured agreement. Many people were still recording, and David could only imagine how this would look when the videos started appearing online. A story that had begun with blatant racism was turning into something much more complex. David stepped forward, speaking for the first time since his mother had arrived. Can I say something? All eyes turned to him. The teenager who had been accused of being a criminal just 30 minutes earlier now commanded the attention of everyone in the electronics section. This shouldn't be about who my mother is, David said clearly, his voice carrying to every corner of the gathered crowd. It shouldn't matter that she works for Tech World, or that I'm an honor student, or that I volunteer in the community. What happened here was wrong because I'm a human being who deserves to be treated with respect, not because of my accomplishments or my family connections. He looked directly at the woman who had accused him. Ma'am, I want you to understand something. Every day, black teenagers who don't have corporate executives for mothers face the same treatment I got today. They don't get dramatic revelations that prove they're worthy of respect. They just get followed around stores, accused of crimes they didn't commit, and treated like criminals for the simple act of existing in public spaces. The woman looked away, clearly uncomfortable with David's direct gaze. But here's what I want everyone to know, David continued, his voice growing stronger. This experience, as awful as it was, isn't going to make me bitter. It's going to make me work harder. I speak to young people about overcoming prejudice and building understanding between communities. Today just gave me a more powerful story to tell. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a flyer. This is information about the youth workshops I help facilitate at the Riverside Community Center. We meet every other Saturday to talk about these exact issues: how to respond to prejudice, how to stand up for others, and how to build bridges instead of walls. To everyone's surprise, David walked directly to the woman who had accused him and held out the flyer. "Ma'am, I'd like to invite you to one of our sessions. I think you might learn something, and honestly, I think we could learn something from you too. Understanding comes from dialogue, not from avoiding each other." The woman stared at the flyer like it might bite her. Her hands shook slightly as she took it, clearly overwhelmed by David's grace in the face of her hatred. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You could start with an apology," suggested the older man who had defended David earlier. The woman looked around at the crowd, many of whom were still recording. David could see the internal struggle playing out on her face. Part of her clearly wanted to maintain her defensive position, but another part seemed genuinely affected by David's mature response to her behavior. "I'm sorry," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "I was wrong to assume." "I was wrong about everything," David nodded. "Thank you. That means something." Dr. Williams watched this exchange with obvious pride in her son, but she wasn't finished with the store's response. "Tom, what specific steps is Tech World going to take to address this?" The manager cleared his throat. "Well, Dr. Williams, I think we need to review our staff training protocols. Clearly, our employees need better guidance on how to handle situations like this." "That's a start," Dr. Williams agreed. "But I think we need to go further. I want to see mandatory bias training for all staff, clear policies about customer treatment, and regular community outreach to build better relationships with all our customers." She paused, thinking. "And I want David's laptop purchase to be complimentary today, not because of who I am, but as an acknowledgement that this store failed him as a customer." Tom nodded eagerly. "Of course, absolutely. Anything else?" David spoke up again. "Actually, I'd like to pay for the laptop. I worked hard to save that money, and buying it myself means something to me. But maybe the store could make a donation to the Riverside Community Center's youth programs instead." The crowd murmured approval at David's response. Even in this moment of potential personal gain, he was thinking about helping others. "Done," Tom said immediately. "We'll match whatever the laptop costs and donate it to the center." Dr. Williams smiled at her son. "I'm proud of how you've handled this, David, but I want everyone here to understand that this shouldn't have been necessary. No teenager should have to prove their worthiness to shop in a store." She addressed the crowd that had gathered. "I hope everyone who witnessed this today will remember it. Remember that racism isn't always loud and obvious. Sometimes it looks like someone following a black teenager around a store. Sometimes it looks like assumptions about who can afford what. And remember that standing up for what's right isn't always easy, but it's always necessary." As the crowd began to disperse, several people approached David to express their support or ask about the community center programs. The sales associate who had originally helped him came over with the laptop he'd been considering. "Ready to complete your purchase?" the young man asked with a smile. David looked at the laptop, then at his mother, then at the flyer still clutched in the woman's hand. "You know what? Yes, but I want to do something first." He turned to address the remaining onlookers. "Everyone here has seen something important today. You've seen how quickly normal activities can be turned into accusations based on prejudice, but you've also seen how situations can be transformed when people choose understanding over hatred." He gestured toward the woman with his flyer. "Change is possible, but it requires all of us to be willing to have difficult conversations. It requires people who've been hurt to extend grace, and people who've caused hurt to acknowledge it and do better." The woman finally looked up at David. "Will you really welcome me at one of those community center meetings?" "Absolutely," David replied without hesitation. "Everyone is welcome who comes with an open mind and a willingness to learn." As David finally completed his laptop purchase, using the money he'd saved from months of hard work, the store began to return to normal. But the videos recorded on dozens of phones were already being uploaded to social media, where they would reach millions of people. The story would go viral, but not for the reasons anyone expected. It wasn't just another video of racist behavior, though it certainly captured that. It was a powerful example of how grace, dignity, and wisdom could transform a moment of hatred into an opportunity for education and growth. David walked out of Tech World Electronics that day with more than just a new laptop. He carried with him the knowledge that his response to injustice had touched people's hearts and minds. His mother drove alongside him, proud of the young man her son had become. The woman who had accused him went home that afternoon and, after hours of internal struggle, decided to attend the next community center workshop. It would be the beginning of a difficult but important journey toward understanding the impact of her prejudice and working to change it. And the story lived on through social media, shared by millions of people who were inspired by David's grace under pressure and his determination to respond to hatred with education rather than anger. It became a teaching tool in schools and community centers across the country, showing young people that they could choose how to respond to injustice, and that sometimes the most powerful response was kindness, wisdom, and an invitation to do better. David's new laptop would help him through 4 years of college. But the real education that day happened for everyone who witnessed it, online and in person. Sometimes the most important lessons happen in the most unexpected places, taught by the most unlikely teachers.